Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Progress America Unfiltered. I'm Tyler, and I'm here with Linda and Jocelyn to get into the hot topics for this week. So let's jump into it. The first thing we're going to talk about are the results of two important elections that we had earlier this week. We're talking about the Supreme Court election in Wisconsin and the mayoral election in Chicago. So in Wisconsin, Judge Janet Protasiewicz, I hope I'm saying that right, I practice, delivered a great win for progressives. In Wisconsin, the Supreme Court was split 4-4 thanks to a retiring judge. And so this gave Democrats and progressives the majority on this court for the next 10 years, which is going to be a really big deal. Wisconsin is going to have upcoming court cases on gerrymandering, voting rights, abortion rights. So this is going to be really, really important to have a progressive justice on the bench. And then in Chicago, we had another progressive win with Brandon Johnson becoming Chicago's next mayor. He was the former Cook County commissioner, and he ran on a platform of transformative justice and rethinking policing and addressing the community's needs in an inclusive way. So it's really exciting to see these progressive wins across the country. So Jocelyn, I'm going to toss it to you first. What do you think about the results from this election, and what do you think this means for 2024 and beyond?
So for the Wisconsin one, I think like most sensible people, I was really relieved, but I was also struck by the inordinate power that these sort of niche elections are starting to have over our democracy. For those who don't know, Wisconsin was a blue state for a really long time, and aggressive gerrymandering has put it more into the swing state situation, which is just representative of our current conundrum where more and more elected officials do not represent the popular will of the people. And that's not really a democracy. So I'm happy, and I'm obviously happy that a person who's very vocal about the right to choose and the right to the ballot and all these things that we need is there. But this shouldn't have been this stressful, right? This wasn't an unnecessary situation to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think an alternate title for this election is Biden just won Wisconsin. We joked about that in our internal meetings here at Progress America Unfiltered because, as some of you may know, President Biden won Wisconsin by only 20,000 votes in 2020. So this is a tight swing state. It is due to, like Jocelyn said, a lot of heavily gerrymandered districts that have been really just drawn in a way that only benefits Republicans, and those maps are going to be that way for a while. So having a justice that can reject maps like this in the future and ensure equitable maps that represent the will of Wisconsinites, I think is going to be great. And hopefully it'll be just in time for 2024. But Linda, do you have any thoughts about Wisconsin or Chicago?
Yeah, so in terms of especially Wisconsin, it's really interesting what that says about the state of the right wing and about Trump's base. Like, this would have been their chance if they wanted to express outrage about Trump's indictment, right? This is a really far-right, Trumpy Republican judge that they could have voted for, incredibly anti-choice, also said some terrible things about Social Security as well. If they wanted to kind of send a message to the libs, like lay off Trump, and that didn't happen. The turnout was very huge among Democrats, actually. And Judge Janet, I believe, she outdid Biden's numbers in many parts of the state. And so this just shows that, Trump may still have some hardcore fans, but that it's really a very vocal minority, and that electorally a lot of people are just sick of him, and that he certainly can't carry Republicans when he's not on the ticket.
Absolutely. And some important things that we learned in this race is that, one, abortion rights is extremely important. One of the key things that Judge Janet brought up throughout this race is that, Wisconsin added to the ballot like a referendum on this 1800 total abortion ban that has been on the state's books, since then. And now that Roe was gutted by the Supreme Court, Wisconsin is facing a decision of whether to actually enforce that, centuries old abortion ban or, allow people the right to the autonomy over their own bodies. So it's great that we saw people come out in droves to vote for autonomy. And similarly, I think in Chicago, we saw some really exciting stuff when it came to policing. We've seen so much on the right wing, this narrative of like crime and fear and people coming into your homes and hurting you, that kind of fear mongering that we've been seeing a lot on the streets, dealing with crime rates. And Brandon Johnson ran on a platform that was like, we need to have something that is, transformative and something that includes not just police and not just people in neighborhoods who are impacted, but everyone needs a seat at the table to talk about how to address crime. And it's not as simple as just throwing more police officers onto the street. And so it's really resounding to see how well that message resonated with voters. And it's important to note that in both races, young people really stood out. They turned out, they brought wins for both Democrats. So I'm hoping that we'll see even more of this in 2024.
Yeah, and I think it's really worth noting that the people in the neighborhoods of Chicago with the highest crime rates voted for Johnson at some of the highest levels. And so I think that it's people who are really impacted by rising crime as opposed to who just see scary segments about it on Fox News, who understand that, as you said, the way to solve the issue, it's nuanced and it takes a lot more than just throwing police at the problem. And people who are impacted understand that.
Absolutely. So some exciting stuff. It's a little hopeful note on today's episode, but now we're going to talk about something that's a little more murky waters, not quite as hopeful. So Linda, I need to ask you, what's going on with Medicaid right now?
Yeah, so what's happening with Medicaid right now, it's pretty terrible stuff. So in March of 2022, Congress passed the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which prevented states from involuntarily removing anyone who currently was receiving Medicaid from coverage. But that is now expiring, which means that roughly 15 million people could lose their Medicaid coverage, including 6.8 million. So that's roughly half of these people are still legally eligible for Medicaid, but the problem is that they have to fill out a form to prove that they're still eligible, and many people don't know that they're supposed to do that or aren't in life circumstances where they're able to. Maybe the form went to an old address. I mean, a lot of low-income people, they're facing, evictions or having to move a lot. And so the federal government, they're giving states a year to review eligibility, and in theory, this year could be used to try to make sure that all those people who are still eligible fill out the form for workers to go out and find them. But some states, they're like, oh, we don't want a year. We want to kick people off Medicaid as quickly as we can. And so 4 states, Arizona, Arkansas, Idaho, New Hampshire, and South Dakota, are starting to kick people off of Medicaid this month in April. And special shout out to South Dakota, shame out, maybe I should say, because the voters in South Dakota just voted to expand Medicaid over the objections of the Republican governor and state legislature. And that's going to be kicking in starting in July. So that's going to make a lot of these people who they're kicking off in April are going to be eligible again starting in July. But South Dakota's like, nah, we just want to take their healthcare coverage away.
Wow. That's a lot to take in, and it's really, really frustrating. So, Jocelyn, do you have any thoughts about this? And, seeing time and time again how certain legislatures, Republican legislatures, are just jumping at the chance to take away benefits from people who've earned them?
Yeah, I think it may sound obvious, but I'm always struck by the unnecessary and oppressive complexity of the American healthcare system and the great variance in state to state and how people, this year it's this and next year it's this. So on quick plug on ACT TV's Care Talk, we answer questions about your health insurance. But how absolutely wild that we have to have these conversations at all. Imagine what we could do with our intellectual energy instead of, hyper focusing on this piece of legislation or that piece of legislation. In a lot of countries, you just have healthcare. Now, my doctor mother was chastising me this weekend about how we have to be honest about a lot of how in other countries, a lot of rich people do choose to seek out private care, but that's a choice. That's a choice they're making. They're saying, okay, I want this cosmetic procedure, or I prefer this physician. They can do that. There is a big difference between deciding to not take the options offered you and knowing you will die if you do not have the money available to access basic care.
Absolutely. And I can't stop going back to the idea of the self-fulfilling prophecy, I think, that a lot of right-wing legislators kind of use when it comes to social programs, especially like Social Security or like Medicare, where they will actively do things that make the program worse, okay? Kicking people off for some kind of bureaucratic technicality of the wrong paperwork and things like that, and whatever the heck South Dakota is doing, and then be like, see, these programs don't work, they're so confusing, blah blah blah, nobody's being helped, when in fact it's because of the way these programs are being set up and the way that they're being enforced that's harming people, not the programs themselves. The programs themselves are vital and necessary to so many people. So it's really frustrating that I feel like we're always talking about this and how they're always trying to get rid of these things. But, the best we can do is to continue advocating for ourselves. Do you have any thoughts on that, Linda, of how we can, support these programs and kind of push back against this ridiculousness?
Yeah, so on Medicaid specifically, I would encourage people to Google their own state in Medicaid and see, first of all, do you live in a state that's expanded Medicaid? And also, how is your state handling this Medicaid cliff that's happening now? Because there's really a huge variety. There's, as I was saying, 5 states that are kicking people off starting in April, and then others that are doing it over the next few months, and, some that are still figuring it out. And so I would encourage people to see what their states are doing and then to contact your state legislatures, your governor if you can, and tell them, hey, I'm your constituent and I don't want you to take people's health care away. I want you to work to keep people on their health care and to expand it. And then more broadly, in terms of expanding all these programs, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, my day job is communications director at Social Security Works. So if folks follow us on Facebook, on Twitter at SSWorks, and online at socialsecurityworks.org, we're always putting out a lot of updates about how to protect various social insurance and as well as safety net programs.
I love that. I will definitely be doing that just to track, even though, I'm not on Medicare. Do it for your loved ones. Do it for your community. Even if it doesn't apply to you, still take these things to heart because it could and might apply to you one day. So let's all look out for each other. Healthcare is a human right. That's all that I have on the agenda. Is there anything else anybody wants to cover before we wrap this episode up?
Well, I know we've been talking on this show lately about our bracket.
Yes.
It seems that we have a winner. And I gotta say, I just mentioned communications director of Social Security Works, where we work to protect and expand Social Security. And in that capacity, I'm not a huge fan of this particular winner, but the people have spoken. President Jed Bartlett, who privatized Social Security on TV, is the winner of the presidential bracket.
Yes. Congratulations, I guess, to Martin Sheen, who played President Jed Bartlett on The West Wing. I didn't vote for you. I voted for Meryl Streep. So, I will demand a recount, but that's what happened. So thank you to all who voted in our presidential bracket. We'll have more fun stuff like this coming up in the upcoming weeks, but you know where to find us. Follow us, like, comment, share, subscribe, Progress America Unfiltered, and we will see you guys next time. Bye, everyone.